High-quality, school-based civic learning opportunities are critical to lifelong, effective engagement in our constitutional democracy. I developed a passion for politics as a young kid, and I fondly remember experiences along my K-12 journey that cultivated that passion. One moment in particular that lingers is in fifth grade, when as a school we convened to watch the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And of course it was a tragic day. Space Shuttle carried a social studies teacher from New Hampshire into space, Christy McAuliffe, and it exploded upon launch right before our innocent eyes. But that day, President Reagan gave an address from the Oval Office and really soothed our pain and helped make sense of that tragic moment. I also remember a moment in high school. It was in the midst of the 1992 election, and in our social studies classes, we were asked to compile a portfolio of newspaper clippings. I know it sounds antiquated at this point, but tracking a very competitive campaign that actually had a third-party candidate, Ross Perot, that was fascinating and certainly further sparked my interest in politics. So much so that the following fall, when I went to college, I decided to major in political science and history, and got a few years into that academic journey and had to think about what I was going to do with that skill set, and it made the most sense to me to pursue a career as a high school social studies teacher, with the thinking that I could translate some of that passion, some of my personal passion with students and inspire a similar interest in politics. And it was a couple of years into my teaching journey when I moved to Chicago and I took a job in the suburbs at a place called Community High School in West Chicago, and they had this really innovative government class where students were members of a semester-long simulation. It was called the legislative semester, and would debate issues in class using parliamentary procedure, write legislation, declare political parties, and then ultimately consider that legislation in all school field trips called committee hearings and full sessions of the legislature. And that experience has now been in place for almost 3 decades, and the results are just miraculous. So their academic studies demonstrating its results, but a few that just stick to me. One of the early students that experienced the legislative semester just got elected to the state senate, representing the district that includes the school. A student of mine runs a high-profile DC political consulting firm. And another student of mine who came to this country at the age of 6 as an immigrant from Mexico, now is a high-profile attorney serving immigrants, and was just elected a year ago to the school's Hall of Fame. And a lot of the credit to this goes to a mentor of mine, a teacher by the name of Steve Arnold. And he would mentor me each day over lunches where we'd talk about the legislative semester. He was actually retiring that year and wanted to make sure that it continued under my leadership. And I remember asking him one time why every student in Illinois didn't have a similar experience to the legislative semester. And he said to me that was my job to figure out. So I proceeded down that path, took a job a couple of years later working at a Chicago-based foundation with a democracy program that partly advocated for stronger civic education in the state of Illinois. So I proceeded to chair a state task force centered on civic education, which resulted in a series of policy wins, including a required high school class in civics, a middle school class in civics, and updated state standards that centered students' civic engagement. A few years into those policies being in place, we have really strong results among students who've taken the class, so much stronger intent to vote among students when they turn 18, to volunteer in their communities, and to pay attention to state and local issues. I would contend that these results are building blocks of our democracy, and they speak to the transformational power of high-quality school-based civic learning. And I'm hopeful in a new position where I'm leading state policy and advocacy across the country that the Illinois model, inspired by my own formative experiences as a student, the legislative semester in West Chicago, can be replicated from sea to shining sea.